The question is that the motion be agreed to. I recognise the honourable member
Speaker.
Philip Goff.
Mr Speaker, just before I start on this bill, can I acknowledge the work of a senior researcher for Labor, Bridget Service, who helped on this bill and who is leaving after many years of work, hard work on behalf of our MPs here. Thank you, Bridget, for the work that you've done on our behalf. Mr Speaker, I want to come now to the bill and say that I respond with amazement to Nathan Guy's statement that it was important to get feedback from the veterans and to meet the veterans' needs. Because we sat through those submissions and we heard, unlike the acting minister, what the veterans said and what the New Zealand Royal Services Association said about the inadequacy of some parts of this bill. And I reject the minister's statement that there is no grounds for saying that before a person is eligible for a veteran's pension, they have to be significantly disabled. What the RSA told the Select Committee and what the veterans have told the Select Committee and what New Zealanders would support is this: if you are a New Zealander eligible for New Zealand superannuation and you have served your country in an overseas deployment gazetted by the Minister and recognised by the Chief of Defence Force as having put yourself in harm's way, then surely that is the appropriate threshold for a person to be eligible for a veteran's pension. That was recommended by the Law Commission, Mr Speaker. That was asked for by the New Zealand RSA. That's what the families of the veterans who sacrificed so much thought was appropriate, and the national government ignored those views, those requests, those pleadings. I have here a letter from the RSA. It's signed, sir, by the National President, General Don McIver, a man who is much respected in this House. And he said that it was very disappointing that the Select Committee decided not to progress the provision of removing the requirement of serious impairment before you are eligible for a veteran's pension. He said it's particularly disappointing to those veterans who have served their country with loyalty and with honour, but it's also disappointing to the RSA membership as a whole. He raises the question in this letter, and it's gone to various members of this House, that during the Law Commission's processes, and the Law Commission that did the review that led to this legislation strongly recommended that the threshold of serious impairment be removed. He said neither we nor the Commission were able to find out why it should be necessary to be significantly disabled to qualify for the veteran's pension. He says the figure, the 52% significant disability figure, is entirely arbitrary. I asked officials time and again at the Select Committee, what is the grounds for saying before a person can get a veteran's pension, they must have 52% of total disability? No answer, sir. No answer, except that was historically the case. No rationale, entirely arbitrary. And the other thing the RSA points out is something that I concur with strongly. They point out that while the government gave no explanation for its decision, they declined it, saying, not progressed at this point of time. Not progressed at this point of time. Mr Speaker, we're talking about 16,700 elderly veterans, many of whom left their families and served this country for years overseas, putting themselves at harm's risk, that are dying in their droves at the moment because they're in their 80s and 90s. Not progressing at this point of time is a cynical answer from a government that knows time is not on the side of our veterans. Mr Speaker, we're not asking for a lot. Nobody gets the veteran's pension, first of all, until they've reached the age of superannuation. That's 65 at the present time. You don't get the veteran's pension on top of superannuation. you get it instead of superannuation. So the costs are actually quite small. They're relatively small things that are a gesture of gratitude by us to those who put their lives in the firing line on behalf of their country. It's about getting a community services card. It's about, if you're in hospital for more than 13 weeks, being able to retain your pension rather than losing it. And it's about a lump sum payment on death. And yes, the Minister's right, that lump sum payment will go to the widow usually, but surely the widow is entitled to something in recognition of what she gave up while her husband or partner was serving this country for long years during the Second World War. Mr. Speaker, this year, 2014, is a special year. It's a special year because we commemorate the centenary of 100,000 New Zealanders going to serve in the First World War, of which 1 in 5 died and 6 out of 10 were either killed or injured. 20 years later, our parents' generation went to serve in that war, and another 12,000 lost their lives. And the people came back after years of serving their country, and many of them scarred inside and often scarred physically as well. And why is it so much to ask this government that instead of just rhetoric about our gratitude to the veterans, we actually give them something tangible? There's 16,700 of them at the moment. And you know what it's going to cost, Mr. Speaker? I asked Veterans Affairs, so I have the official figures. In the first year, it'll cost $11.1 million. That's 2014-15. By 2017-18, in 3 years' time, that will be down to $8 million, just $8 million, because at the level of the passing on of the World War II and the Korean veterans. Mr. Speaker, what I'm asking for, and I've been totally upfront, and the Select Committee, as members will attest, and to the Minister, in saying there is a gap in this bill. There is a gap that the Law Commission that did all of the hard yards on this bill recommended should be closed. There's a gap in this bill that the RSA, with its wisdom and its right to represent the interests of veterans, said, please fix this. And the government hasn't, because it says that it'll cost too much. On one hand, there's $60 million going to be spent over 5 years. On the other hand, just $11 million dropping to $8 million a year that is required to fill that gap to enable the people who have returned as veterans to have the pride of saying, I'm not just a superannuitant, I'm a war veteran. That's what they want it for. They're not actually even particularly interested in these small financial benefits. They want to have the pride of saying, I have served my country. And what better way of saying that than to say, I am in receipt of a veteran's pension. This is how my country has recognised what I have done on behalf of my nation. That's what we're asking for, Mr. Speaker, and I will, in the Committee of the Whole, be moving an amendment through a supplementary order paper to pick up the Law Commission's recommendation, to pick up what those veterans have asked us so sincerely for, to pick up what the RSA says is a major gap in this legislation. And I've got one other comment, sir, and it's to the Minister of Defence. You know, we know that morale and attrition rates both reached record low in the case of morale and record high in the case of attrition. We know that the Auditor-General, when she reported on this, said that is because the government is perceived by the men and women of the New Zealand Defence Force to have broken the social contract between government and the services. They have no union, they don't negotiate a deal. I want to say to the Minister of Defence this, and I say it sincerely. The best way that we can tell our current serving members of the New Zealand Defence Force that we honour their commitment and their service is to pass something that recognises that we see our commitment extending into their retirement years. The best way we can deal with the problems of recruitment and retention is to send that message to our serving soldiers today. won't cost as much for another 30 years. Most of those that served in Timor-Leste, in the Solomons, in Afghanistan and Bosnia won't be retiring for 30 years. But this year, the centenary year of our joining the First World War, is surely the appropriate time to say to our veterans, we honour you. We honour you not simply with our rhetoric, but we honour you with a practical measure that you have asked for and we can easily deliver, that is affordable and is justified. Mr Speaker, I commend my SOP to the House and the Committee of the Whole.
Mr Speaker.